In a world of 350 billion movie podcasts, two chumps have decided that now is the time for cult movies to engage in combat. Disagreements will be had, blood may be spilled, and voiceover artists most definitely will not be paid. This is Cult Film Face-Off.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Cult Film Face-Off. My name is Chet Roivas. With me as usual is Nick Leonard.
Welcome.
This episode we're going to be looking at the debuts of the two Scott brothers, Ridley and Tony, although technically we're not, because Tony Scott's first film was actually a film called Loving Memory, made in 1971. Did you hear about this?
No.
Yeah, it's a black and white, it's a very interesting sounding film about a grieving couple, but it doesn't sound like anything else in Tony Scott's oeuvre, and no one's seen it. I mean, the BFI released a DVD, but no one's seen it, so I thought it was better to look at, what's technically his first Hollywood film. So we're going to be looking at The Duellists from 1977, Ridley Scott, and The Hunger from 1983, Tony Scott's American debut. But we'll start off with The Duelist, 1977, a historical drama directed by Ridley Scott. Based on a short story by Joseph Conrad, The Duelist charts the decades-long feud between two Napoleonic soldiers.
The duelist demands satisfaction. Honor for him is an appetite, an obsession to kill. No apology is accepted, no quarter given. Only death will satisfy honor.
You have insulted me!
I have strained my patience in order not to do so.
The enemies of reason have a certain blind look. He has that look, don't you think?
Right, guys, had you seen this before?
No, I've never seen this before.
Yeah, me neither. It was the first time for me. Where did you watch it? I watched the Netflix.
I got on Netflix.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, I'll say this about the version that's on Netflix. The audio mix is terrible. Did you find... I mean, I was turning on and off subtitles because I couldn't... I think it was the style in which it was made, but also I don't think the audio mix was particularly good. Did you not?
No, the dialogue was definitely pitched down a bit, and when the score was coming through, it was kind of booming through the speakers, so it was a little bit inconsistent. But I didn't have to resort to putting on the subtitles though. I got what was being said.
Maybe just me. One thing I will say, first of all, about this film, I think it's the best looking film that Ridley Scott has made. The cinematography is stunning, and there's prolonged sequences, particularly when they're in Russia, where every single shot looked like a painting. And I looked up the cinematographer, a guy by the name of Frank Tidy, and I expected his name to just be on Oscar winners non-stop, some of the best looking films ever. And Stop or My Mum Will Shoot.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, I did that as well. I did the exact same thing. Is that the look of the film is beautiful. It's gorgeous, and it's kind of like I'm there going, right. He's obviously got a very much an ad background. He comes from an advertising background, so he kind of has these beautiful shots, and the cinematography, especially like the end shot of the movie with the lens flare, Harvey Keitel very much dressed up in Napoleon garb. Looking at, I was just like, shit. Yeah. Beautiful.
It's a stunning looking film, but yeah, his resume is very interesting. I mean, he also was the cinematographer on Under Siege, so he in some ways he hit the biggest stunt possible. But yeah, I think the similarity between these two films is that the source, they both come from, Whitley Strieber wrote the book that The Hunger is based on, and this was based on a Joseph Conrad short story. I watched both of them thinking, I don't know if I'm getting what was so appealing about the original source material. And this is a film that I watched in a kind of state of bemusement, I suppose. I mean, did you enjoy it?
It was. I enjoyed looking at it.
Yeah, that's it.
It's kind of a big ask to stretch. It's quite an interesting concept. The concept is two guys are dueling over a period of 15 years, and they keep having these duels, and they never come to any kind of finite conclusion, and they keep going through time. I thought that was a really interesting short film prospect.
That's what I mean. It sounds like perfect fodder for a short story.
But to stretch it out to that degree was a bit of an arse. So enjoying it's a difficult thing because you don't really get. I mean, especially with the Harvey Keitel character, you don't really get any backstory with him whatsoever. You get more with Keith Carradine and the love interest and everything. I was thinking to myself, why did Ridley Scott choose to do this film? And maybe it's his kind of comment about Vietnam and about how combat is futile.
Yeah, okay.
And that was a futile. I'm thinking, is that why he's done that? Is it kind of a political thing for him going, because this is just pointless?
Yeah. That never occurred to me, but that makes much more sense because I was watching it just thinking, what is this film about? And there's a lot of it captures a lot of behaviour. I mean, Keith Carradine's character, the behaviour that he exhibits, I was just like, what is this telling me about him? I don't really understand who he is as a person. I did also Google to see if anyone sort of thought of this to be some kind of gay parable.
Oh, right.
Because, I mean, Keith Carradine's
The old pink card.
No, it would admittedly be flimsy if anyone viewed it like that. But Keith
Phallic
Carradine's
sauce.
Keith Carradine's character is the only person in the film who is in any way respectful to women.
Yeah.
There's a long scene where he's walking up a road and a prostitute's trying. He's like, he's laughing her off, and no. But you know, the way the film plays out, it's not interested in the fact that it takes place over the French Revolution. I mean, it takes place over decades, and you're thinking like, I mean, even if you don't have any kind of knowledge about how that war played out, there's changes in location and changing in time. You're just like, I don't know how this affects the characters. I don't know how it affects the story, because it basically doesn't. It's all stuff.
It's all style.
Yeah, and but Keith Carradine's character, things that happen to him in the film, I would just found myself asking, what does he think about that? Basically, he falls in love. And this woman he's in love with says, "Oh, you know, someone back at my home village has proposed to me," and he's like, "Oh, why don't you go marry him?" And she does go and do that. A few years later, they meet by accident, and there's a lot of meeting by mistake. I mean, there's a hilarious moment when Harvey Keitel and him meet in Russia over a bonfire. And he's like, "How would they not know? They're in the same battalion, and they just
all the bonfires."
Exactly. And there's like the dramatic, they're sat opposite each other. It's like ridiculous. But he bumps into this woman again. And he asks how her husband is, and she says, "Oh, you know, he died of syphilis. I'm having to raise my own kids. I haven't got any money, so I'm basically having to be a prostitute." And then they go their separate ways and they walk off. And I'm just like, "What? Does that upset him? Does that drive him? What does that do?" But they just walk away, and then it's another scene. I'm constantly watching it, thinking, "What's going on in his mind? Well, who is that?"
But you
character?
never lose that. He just kind of gives off this kind of. He's pretty kind of smug a lot of the time.
That's why. How do you feel about this whole thing? That's a discussion that's been going on for years, that Ridley Scott cannot direct actors.
Well,
how do you feel about it? Because I am Kermode reviewed Mark Kermode, the BBC critic, reviewed The Martian. He said, "Oh, people say that Ridley Scott can't direct actors. I think he can." And The Martian is a perfect illustration of how he can't. Have you seen it?
No.
It's different actors doing things, and you don't know who's doing what. You've got Jeff Daniels being very serious. You've got Sean Bean, who looks like they recorded the rehearsal. We didn't know they were recording it. And then you've got Donald Glover being a comedian, and it's completely off kilter. There's an interview on the Hannibal DVD where Anthony Hopkins is interviewed about why Ridley Scott's a great director, and he says, "Do you know why he's a great director? Because he doesn't get involved." He says, "Do it faster or do it slower. That's a great director." Admittedly, I think Anthony Hopkins was at his most disillusioned with the acting process at that point, but the fact that he said that about Ridley Scott, what's great is that he doesn't involve himself. I think this is very, very apparent in The Duellists, because you've got Harvey Keitel being Harvey Keitel. That works for the film. I don't think that's a bad choice, but yeah,
I think it's an interesting choice, because you're like, what is he doing in it? And he kind of. It's honestly, I was looking at it going like, because you're just expecting him to kind of slip off his accent, and he doesn't. He keeps to it really well, and I think, you know, I looked at a few reviews and everything, and people say, "Oh, he's terribly miscast in that role." I don't agree with him being miscast in that role, you know, at all. I think he's, you know, the whole. Alluding to it, him being Napoleon and everything, the angry little man and everything. I think, you know, the violent, you know, completely that switch that he's got.
Yeah.
Harvey Keitel is that guy that can just flip.
That's why I think that works. I mean, that side of it works, I think. But Keith Carradine, I don't know who that guy is. He is just aloof and kind of smirking the whole time.
Yeah.
You're like, who is that guy? That's why when there's scenes that should be sort of catastrophic to his character, as someone who's sort of presented as being such a good person, you're like, how do you feel about the love of his life?
But he hasn't got the emotional depth. You know, he doesn't show any emotional depth in that film. He's kind of a bit monosyllabic in his reactions.
That's why I kind of felt at the end of the film, did they intend this to be? You know, are they trying to suggest that Keith Carradine's character could the only person he could relate to or have any kind of relationship with Harvey Keitel? But again, I'm just like, what? It was a very confusing film. I couldn't, in terms of the narrative, the engine that drives the narrative is a guy who wants to kill another guy, and he just relentlessly, every time they meet, he wants to kill him, and that's a very, very simple and engaging engine to drive the film. But I was just like, what? I just sat there watching it, liking this could be a silent film. I don't really know what's.
What I thought was done really well were the choreography on the sword fights. that they felt like a real sword fight.
I think
they were clumsy at times. They were kind of, they weren't perfectly choreographed. I thought they were done really well.
I think it's sort of split. I think the ones when there's one sword fight that's done in one shot.
Yeah, I know the one. It's the one where they literally at the end, they've hardly got the energy.
No, that was cut quite fast. The one that it's one of the first ones that they have where it all takes place and it's over in like probably 6 or 7 seconds.
Is that when he gets done quite quickly?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, right, gotcha.
That was really like whoa. So when the other sword fights are cut very quickly, very kind of action movie style. I thought I kind of wish that
they kept it being. But it's kind of. But this is the thing, isn't it? This is Ridley kind of his first foray into a big film.
Yeah,
so I think he's mixing up styles, right?
That's totally. Yeah. No, I agree with that. But sticking with the story for that long, I mean, the thing is, the story is about a man who falls foul of a psychopath, and then he has to deal with that psychopath for not the rest of his life, but for a long period of his life. And when you look at what prompted their feud in the first place, Harvey Keitel, who was married, I think, with children, was trying to bed this sort of aristocrat woman, and he'd had a duel early in the day, so Keith Carradine turns up because it's his duty.
Well, he's delivering the message.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what inspires him to, he offers him out to a duel. But for all of those years, for this guy just wanting to kill him because he got cock-blocked, that's it.
I want him to turn around and go, "Don't shoot the messenger," or stab me repeatedly over 3 decades.
But the thing is, like, it takes place over this. It's an epic film in the sense that it takes place. But I was like, what does the war have to do with this? Nothing.
Well, nothing. It was just incidental, isn't it? It doesn't go into any of that.
But the thing, there's one point at which Harvey Keitel tries to turn his superiors against the Keith Carradine character by saying, "Oh, he's a royalist. He's just turncoat."
Yeah.
And then the next scene, it's after Napoleon's been killed. It's like 5 years later or so, and you see that Keith Carradine's character is chummy with the royals and everything. So he is a turncoat. But how does that affect? I mean, Harvey Keitel still wants to kill him. So what's changed? Nothing. It's just it captures all of these bits of business, but it doesn't really contribute to the story.
It's just a backdrop. It doesn't flesh out into any of those segments of what's actually going on.
Yeah, that's
which is a pity, because then it would kind of give it more heft in terms of the overarching.
Yeah, you want to get behind either one of those characters and find out what Harvey Keitel's a nutter, the other guy isn't. That's the story, and I was just like, there's got to be something more here. There's got to be something. That's one of the most confusing things about this film. I just wanted some kind of drama, some kind of something to get behind, but it's just nothing. It's just like some guy wants to kill another guy. I'd rather it was just the duels one after the other.
Yeah.
Because you could have done more storytelling in a way like that. But when big character beats happen, and they don't have any...
Well, you just wait for the next duel to happen.
That's what I mean.
Because it's fluff in between duels.
But when drama happens and it has no bearing on the characters, you just think... I know I've mentioned about it being a gay parable and stuff, but there's that really weird bit at the end, in the immediate... just before the final duel, where Keith Carradine's got married, which is a marriage he almost talked himself out of, and he's had a child, and his wife gets him to feel as the baby kicks, and she says, "Oh, come to bed," and he walks away and goes downstairs and lovingly polishes his gun. I mean, I know it's the flimsiest if you're looking for it to be a gay parable, it's the flimsiest thing ever, but you just think, what is it, that whole idea that he can only have any kind of relationship with this guy who wants to kill him? But the story doesn't tell you why that's the case. You're just supposed to look at this enigmatic, inexplicable weirdo. I don't know. As a drama, I think it's a failure, and I'm surprised that it was so well reviewed when it came out.
What I thought was done really well is the sword fights. The choreography and the sword fights was done well, because it wasn't, at times there was a mix of it being very unpolished, and as you'd imagine, as how a sword fight would be playing out. There's one prolonged sequence where they've got nothing left,
no energy left,
and they can barely lift their swords up to administer another slash of the sword.
Yeah.
And I thought that was done interestingly.
I thought my favourite sword fight was the one that was done in one shot.
Yeah.
And it was over. But I mean, the benefit was that it was over in about sort of 8 or 9 seconds. So they couldn't have done all of them like that. But there was no sense of danger in the other ones, because it was standard Hollywood cut. But
this is a guy a guy kind of cutting his teeth. This is his first film, so I think there's ways he's experimenting with doing it in real time and then doing it super stylised with loads of cuts.
Yeah, but I mean, when you saw them, actually, it was only 8 or 9 seconds of film, but it was so well choreographed that you just thought, what? You know, you really felt like they were in danger. The actors. Yeah. That was a great sequence.
Also worth mentioning is the solid cast of British thespians as a support cast. I really liked General Trelliard, Robert Stevens. Thought he was brilliant. The Rada actor cheering up the scenery, and Tom Conti, as always, brilliant, really good as Dr. Jacquin. So I thought that added a bit of sheen to proceedings as well. I really good.
It was brilliantly cast. I mean, even little bit parts, tiny little bit parts, like there's 2 guys that come to him at the end. 2 sort of shady little characters who are sort of skulking at the bottom of his land. I mean, brilliant. I mean, tiny little characters that really stick in your memory just because the actors that are playing them are so good. I read a couple of reviews, or actually more than a couple, from American critics when the film first came out, and they all say the American actors can't cut it against this sort of cavalcade of great British acting. But I don't know if that's true. I do like Keitel. I think Keitel, the fact that he's playing himself to a certain degree is perfect because Keitel often plays a difficult, impossible to understand crazy person.
Yeah.
So that's what that kind of works in his favour. Keith Carradine, I still don't really understand what the deal is with that performance. He's aloof, but then again, I don't understand the character. So what's he working with?
Well, he's working with nothing. There's nothing there. I mean, it's fluff, but he's extremely watchable. And appealing. But he's just got. There's nothing. You don't learn any more from when you're introduced to his character. By the end of the film.
No, you don't. I mean, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when he asked Ridley Scott if he indeed did, what's my motivation? Because whatever is his motivation, whatever's going on, some guy wants to kill him. How do you feel about that? Yeah. The woman you love is just like, she's lost her husband and she's a prostitute. How do you feel about that? No one fucking knows. Why does it change anything? It's a weird film. I did not enjoy it. It's so beautiful to look at, and I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a good film, but
this is Ridley Scott cutting his teeth from an advertising background, who makes beautiful, engaging imagery, and great stuff was to come. It's just it's a hard one. I couldn't really recommend it. I certainly enjoyed the experience because it's just such a beautiful thing. It's like looking at beautiful painting.
That's true. That's what makes it so fucking annoying, because I just wish there was something behind it. I just wish you really either cared about what Keitel was so furious about, or you cared about.
But you don't ever get any. You don't get any reasoning of why he's so pissed and why he has such contempt and hate for Carradine's character.
Because he's a psychopath. I mean, that's just like, he's a psycho, and he wants to kill this guy.
But why?
And the guy is always just like, I mean, we'll have a. I don't know. It was a frustrating film. Beautiful to look at, as we said 100 times. But there was one moment in the very beginning when it's like it cuts to a shot of a street. Mm-hmm. And it's a load of extras wearing really, really pristine, new-looking costumes, standing on street corners, having fake conversations, and there's carts going on. And it's just like I thought this is going to be one of those insufferable British
period.
Like especially before people sort of grubbied up the costumes and stuff, where it's clearly just actors standing there in really, really plush clothes. Thankfully, it never got to that point. It sort of turned into something. So I suppose that's something. I was engaged enough to keep watching and not start looking at the set dressing and looking at what was wrong with the actors and how fake some of it might have been. So, but I mean, I couldn't recommend it.
No, me neither.
That's The Duellists. It's a frustrating film, incredibly frustrating.
What a beautiful looking film.
Yeah, so I'd say watch it for the visuals and prepare to be frustrated. Reading some of the positive reviews that came out of England when it came out, I don't really understand what there is to love, to be honest. But there you go. So that was The Duellists. So now we move on to Ridley Scott's brother's American debut, at least, not his film debut, and that is The Hunger, made in 1983, a horror thriller directed, as I said, by Tony Scott. An Egyptian vampire who lives in upstate New York becomes the obsession of a high-profile scientist looking to combat the aging process. The Hunger.
Sarah Roberts is in jeopardy.
Hey, lady, how about it?
Stay with her. Help her, for she has begun to feel the awful horror of the hunger. John Blaylock. The hunger has given him everlasting life. Until now, pray for him. The timeless beauty of Catherine Deneuve. The cruel elegance of David Bowie. The open sensuality of Susan Sarandon.
combine to create a modern classic of perverse fear. Haunting, mysterious, sensual, strange, perverse, riveting. The Hunger.
Okay, so I had not seen this film before. All I'd ever heard about this film is how terrible it was. I remember as a kid reading movie magazines. Whenever they do a retrospective or a look at Tony Scott, they'd say that it's a stinker. What did you think of it?
Well, okay.
You hadn't seen it before?
No, I'd never seen it before. All I knew about it is that David Bowie was in it, and I was like, right, blood-sucking Bowie. Okay, I'm interested. Fired it up, and the first 20 minutes, I was like, I'm loving the look of it. I'm a big sucker for 80s decadent yuppie culture, and it was like a really fucking cool, edgy, sexy music video. Yeah. So I was kind of like, I'm in. As it kind of, as the story pans out, I say story in the lightest kind of. With the lightest kind of reference of it being a story, I found it quite to kind of trudge through it. It felt long.
Yeah. It felt thin in the same way the Duellists feels thin. It feels like there wasn't enough story to sustain that amount.
Yeah,
of film.
I mean, it's interesting to look at both, isn't it? And to look at both brothers and look at the background. So you've got Ridley with an advertising background, you've got Tony with a music video background, and that's prevalent throughout the whole of this film. What I was really impressed with were the aging effects in this film. Definitely. I mean, the work on show was far better than in films that preceded it 15, 20 years later. They were done superbly. Yeah. And there were certain scenes that I was just like, one scene in particular was the little girl's death.
Yeah, yeah.
The way that was cut with the dropping of the camera flash, I was just like, amazing.
It was good, yeah.
Brilliant.
No doubt.
What I wasn't so keen on is the way that they just completely they disregarded like vampire mythology. Like they didn't have teeth. They were cutting with these decorative anchors,
little blades,
which is the key of life things. I think they're called anchors or whatever. They were making the incisions and then sucking the blood with that. I thought that was a bit weak.
Yeah, I went into this expecting to hate it, and I actually really quite liked it. Although I think that the first half is completely different to the second half, and the first half is far better than the second half. I mean, the first half is about David Bowie's character, and the second half is not about David Bowie's character. But as you said, the aging effects, I was looking at it, I was thinking, what an achievement. I mean, you could see, exactly as you said, you watch films these days and you're just like...
That is a load of really dodgy prosthetics.
Yeah, exactly. And you never thought that, although I will say that David Bowie aging, it never looked like David Bowie. He went from looking like David Bowie to looking like Rutger Hauer to looking like the granddad in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So it didn't really look like him, but at the same time it was faultless technically, and it did benefit because almost all of the film is cast in shadow from somewhere. It's a very, very stylised looking film, so that's going to benefit special effects every time. And I was really engaged for that first half because you were in the shoes of David Bowie's character. Yeah. Like, what do you do? Because he keeps saying to Catherine Deneuve, this is forever. He thinks that he's going to be living forever, and when he suddenly isn't, is he going to randomly kill somebody in the street? In the most 80s sequence that's ever existed, a guy skateboarding on his own, like wearing all of that 80s clobber, and then the scene with the girl where he decides to take the girl's life. It's like, because you're constantly engaged with what's he going to do, how is he going to combat this situation, which was way more involved than I was in The Duellists by far.
I agree, because the second half, that relationship between Susan Sarandon and Deneuve, it wasn't particularly interesting. There was no real kind of... It was really thin. It was like, she came round, I'm really concerned about your husband. Has he gone to a clinic in Switzerland? And let's laze it up a bit. And it was just like... It really petered out. And I was trudging through that second half of the film. I mean, it's once again, there's sequences where it looks fantastic. When all of her previous relationships en masse rock up, I thought that was done really well. That was a strong sequence. Just like you're watching the most audacious 80s pop video. But it was I did feel that there was no real backstory there with that relationship. It was just it was
I really felt like the first half worked on its own, and then it kind of went to turn into something else, and it didn't have that same... I was really engaged. I was really like, what's he going to do? I was totally in his shoes, and then afterwards you're like, these two people are falling in love. I mean, yeah.
I mean, also, I mean, Bowie has such magnetism on screen.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he really did.
I mean, every scene he's in, you're just pulled into, his persona is really strong. And the whole relationship was just really flimsy between Sarandon and Deneuve.
I saw a user review on Rotten Tomatoes, and it said this looks like a Cadbury's Flake commercial. And it actually that's kind of exactly what it looks like. But it made sense because the film was about a couple of ancient vampires who were obsessed with these really outdated senses of beauty and old-fashioned ideas about what elegance is when they sit there playing with their classical music and stuff like that. And I just thought that this kind of seemed to serve the narrative a little bit more than the Duellists did. I mean, that's a pretty thin argument, but it felt more in tune with what the actual film was.
One thing is very interesting for a Tony Scott film is that it's far more subdued than any of his later work. True Romance, Last Boy Scout. It was far more slow moving and gradual. But the thing is that the relationship. There was nothing. There was no backstory about it. There was no the slow build about how those two could have become attracted to one another. It just kind of.
Well, it had to happen because one of them was trying to reverse the aging process, and it's weird that they went that way. A lot of people have said that the book is like really, really stunning, and so I'd like to read the book in the same way that I'd quite like to read the short story on which the Duellists is based, because I feel like both Ridley Scott and Tony Scott didn't really harness what was so appealing about those stories, and people who are fans of the original source material in both cases say exactly the same thing.
It's kind of they stretched out what would essentially be a short film into feature film length.
If this was 45 minutes long, I would have been blown up because I was sitting there thinking this is
it. I mean, this thing they kind of ended the movie with I mean, it could have been a really hard-hitting 45-minute short, and once Bowie was off screen and Suzanne Sarandon and that relationship, that's when I started to lose interest because there was nothing.
It's not really interesting about them being vampires, really. It's not,
and that's such an amazing thing to be able to dig into in terms of stories. Is the whole vampire mythology is something you can really get a lot of narrative out of.
Yeah, true that.
But they kind of skimmed over the top of it.
Yeah, that's in a way that's what's frustrating about both films. It's like there's something there, and it never really gets dealt with in any way. And there were a couple of moments where I just thought, this is fucking stupid. I mean, there was a bit where Susan Sarandon's eating dinner with her husband. It's after she's sort of met Catherine Deneuve, and she appears to be hallucinating naked bodies in a swimming pool.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're sat eating dinner by a window that overlooks a swimming pool. I mean, maybe that restaurant existed in the 80s, I don't know. But I was watching it like, that's fucking ridiculous. Similarly, David Bowie is waiting in a restaurant, a hotel, a hospital. He's in a hospital waiting room, and the nurse says, "No smoking in here, no smoking in here." And when it cuts back when he's aged, a few minutes later, he sat there and the cigarette's burning away in an ashtray. It's like, why is there ashtrays in a hotel? In a hospital waiting room? It seems so fucking. It seems like something that the director put there. Like it seems weird. I don't know. It's flimsy in the same way that the Duellists is flimsy,
but it's just over stylized. That's what it is. It's it's that dreamy stylized music video sensibility, which is kind of permeates through the film.
But without that, what is there?
Well, not a lot.
Well, I'll give it the first 45 minutes. I was so much more engaged in the first 45 minutes by everything, by the way it looked, by the special effects.
I think the opening 20 minutes it was really strong.
Yeah, I agree. That's it's kind of a shame that it kind of was like, okay, well, we'll go and tell this story now, and that story is nowhere near.
They focused on the least interesting narrative.
Yeah, because they wanted to have a big lesbian sex scene.
Well, that was it.
Two movies,
which is what was reported in so much, and the cult status of that film is the leisure stuff.
Have you?
Sorry, it's like a 12-year-old boy. It's the lesbian relationship. It's the leisure stuff.
Have you read Roger Ebert's review?
No.
He hated the film, but he said, "It's my duty to report that the lesbian sex scene was very effective." And it's really interesting watching those two, Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, in the early days, because they're always totally frank when they got turned on by something. And in that review, he says, "I'm just here to report. I'm sorry, reader, but I've got to tell you it was very effective."
Legs crossed, thumbs up.
Okay, well, I mean, I enjoyed The Hunger way much more than I thought I was going to, and the drubbing that I'd seen it get, throughout my childhood, I used to read Empire magazine as a kid, and I feel like I saw that film get reviewed 3 or 4 times, and every time I was like, this is fucking dross, it's rubbish. It's a lot more interesting than that. And I was entirely engaged for, I'd say, at least an hour before I realised that it was kind of tailing off. So, I mean, if I had to pick which one I choose out of these two. I picked The Hunger.
I pick The Hunger.
You picked The Hunger?
Yeah,
okay.
right.
All right, good. No disagreement. Brilliant. Okay, well, that was episode 3 of Cult Film Face Off. Thank you very much for listening. We're on YouTube. Just search CFFO on YouTube. We're on Twitter at Cult Film Face Off. And if you enjoy the show or you have any suggestions for films that we should cover, or you want to have a go at us for making terrible mistakes, just send us a Twitter or email us at cultfilmfaceoff@gmail.com.
And talking about making mistakes, last episode, when talking about Wolf Creek 2, I mentioned a sequence where Mick Taylor is mowing down a load of kangaroos, and I blundered by saying it was to the theme tune of Timey Kangaroo Downsport. It wasn't. It was in fact to The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Okay.
This will happen more often.
It will. But please feel free to contact us by any means necessary to tell us when we've made a mistake, or to suggest. We're genuinely looking for suggestions about films that we should pit against each other. So do that. As I'll repeat again, CFFO on YouTube. There's also idiotic things that we're just going to put periodically up there. We're going to put full episodes up there as well. And then we're at Cult Film Face Off on Twitter, and email us at cultfilmfaceoff@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.
High fives, chest bumps. Laters.
Cult Film Face Off.
I'd done a movie called The Hunger 4 years before, with David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve, and Hollywood hated it, and I couldn't get arrested. You know, they thought it was an artsy, fartsy, esoteric, up itself vampire movie, and I think they thought it was too artsy, too dark, too slow, and so Hollywood didn't like me for it. So it took me 4 more years, and then Don and Jerry saw The Hunger.